Welcome back. We're in our summer series through the Gospel of Mark. And as we are continuing this morning, we're going to be looking at a very important but a very practical question. And here's the question: what do we do when religion becomes exhausting? Okay, what do we do when religion becomes exhausting? What do we do when trying to follow God starts to feel like you're carrying a weight instead of receiving a gift? And we believe that Jesus has an answer for that, and that's what we're going to look at today. So some of you may be feeling like this. Maybe you grew up in a church, or maybe you grew up in a home where faith was about rules, right? You do this, you don't do that. Whatever you do, please don't mess up. And it felt more like pressure than it feels like peace. But what if I told you that Jesus came to set you free, right? We've heard that Jesus has come to set us free. He's come to set us free from that type of religion specifically. And so today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at Mark chapter 2. We're going to start in verse 18. So if you have a Bible, you can turn over to Mark chapter 2. We'll have it on the screens here for you as well. And in this text, what we're going to do is we're going to see a side of Jesus that's bold, that's confrontational, and that's liberating. And what we're going to find is that he's not interested in making religious people feel comfortable. That's not what he came for. Instead, he came to bring life. He came to redefine rest. He came to redefine rules. He came to redefine religion, all in himself. So we're going to begin walking through this passage together. We're going to let the Spirit show us how Jesus cuts through religion and he gets us into real freedom. So let's start reading. Jesus said to them, start in verse 18. Now John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting. People came and they asked him, why do John's disciples and why do the Pharisees' disciples fast, but your disciples do not fast? Jesus said to them, the wedding guest cannot fast while the groom is with them, can they? As long as they have the groom with them, they cannot fast. But the time will come when the groom will be taken away from them, and they will fast on that day. No one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth to an old garment. Otherwise, the new patch pulls away from the old cloth, and a worse tear is made. No one puts new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the wine will burst the skins, and the wine is lost, as well as the skins. No, new wine is put into fresh wineskins. All right, we're going to see Jesus kind of walk through some controversies here. The first controversy that we're going to look at is a question about fasting. Okay, so fasting, as we would understand this, is the idea that you would abstain from something, in most cases food, in order to get closer in your relationship to the Lord or to hear what he has to say to you. And so you're denying yourself in order to get closer to the Lord, okay? So this is a question about fasting here. John's disciples are fasting. That's John the Baptist. The Pharisees and their disciples are fasting, but these ones are not. Jesus' disciples are not. And it seems that everywhere Jesus is, people are having a great time, right? Everywhere Jesus is, people are having a great time. And so then you got the Pharisees, and they're fasting, and they're not having as good of a time, are they? And then you got John's disciples, and they're fasting, and they don't seem to be having as good of a time. But Jesus, where Jesus is, people are having fun, right? They're eating together, they're drinking together, they're celebrating the cool things that Jesus is doing. It's miracles, it's fun, it's freedom. And they're like, well, where's the sadness? Where's the fasting? Jesus, I mean, what's your deal? You're not acting like the rest of us. Or maybe they're asking this, hey, Jesus, why aren't your followers doing what the good religious people are doing? You see, in the Jewish world, fasting, right, it's a sign of devotion, it's a sign of repentance. These are good things, but it become this badge of honor that they would wear. Look how good I am as I fast. Look how good I am as I'm going to deny myself from this. It's a sign of devotion, but it become a badge of honor, something that would prove my spiritual credentials. Instead of how we seek the Lord, how we rely on his goodness, Jesus doesn't discount fasting, right? He actually says, when I'm gone, they'll fast again. He's not discounting fasting. He thinks it's an important thing. But instead, as always, what he's doing is he's looking into their hearts. And so Jesus responds with a wedding metaphor. He says, hey, can the wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them? And so what's he saying here? Jesus is saying, I am not here to add more burdens to your back. I'm here to bring joy, like a groom for a wedding. You don't fast at a wedding. You feast at a wedding. You celebrate. You indulge. You dance. You have fun. And church, the presence of Jesus should change the tone in our lives from mourning to celebration. Jesus, what he's doing is he's redefining the purpose of spiritual practices like fasting, right? Not as pressure, but as an invitation. He's using two metaphors to really drive this home. He's going to talk about an old cloth or a new cloth on an old tear or old wineskins. And what he says is you don't put an unshrunk patch onto an old garment. If you do, the unshrunk patch, it's going to shrink when you wash it. It's going to tear away. You need to shrink the patch first. And then he says you don't put new wine into old wineskins because as it begins to ferment, it's going to burst the wineskins. And so what Jesus is saying here is you can't contain my new way of thinking, my new way of life into your old containers. Jesus didn't come to patch up our religion. He came to make something new. He came to bring in a real relationship with God that's not based on our own effort, but it's based on grace. And so Jesus is saying that we don't fast to prove ourselves to God. Instead, we fast to focus on God. We don't need to rest to fulfill a rule. We rest because we are deeply loved by Jesus. And here's how this all plays out. We often turn spiritual practices into performances. We often will still kind of wrestle with this mindset. We think, man, if I'll just read my Bible enough, if I will just pray hard enough, if I will serve more, if I will fast more, then God will be pleased with me. And those are all really good things, right? There's nothing bad about those things, to serve, to pray, to read our Bible, to fast. Those are all great things. But we're thinking, man, if I'll just be better at that, God will love me more. He'll be pleased with me. But that's the old wineskin mentality. Performance-based faith. Jesus says, I'm the bridegroom. My presence is the point. My presence. I'm not adding pressure. I'm here to bring joy. So if your spiritual life feels like a burden, maybe you're practicing the wrong religion. Maybe you're practicing religion without relationship. And this is the deal. Religion says do, right? Religion says if you do this, you do this, you do this, you'll be closer to God. Religion says do, but Jesus says done. Jesus didn't come to start a religion. He didn't come, but he did come to restore a relationship between us and God. Religion often focuses on what we might do for God, checking all the boxes, following all the rules, trying to earn his approval. But Christianity is about what God has done for us in Jesus. Religion says do, Jesus says done. And Jesus didn't throw out fasting altogether, does he? He actually redefines its purpose. He says it's not about proving your devotion, but it's about focusing your attention. And the same is true for Bible reading. The same's true for worship, church attendance. The same thing's true for tithing. The same thing's true for praying, like all of serving, all of these things, right? It's not about you're proving your devotion. It's about focusing your attention. All of these things, they're meant to connect us to Jesus, not to earn his love, but to connect us to him. So I want you to take a moment. I want you to ask yourself, am I doing the things that I do? Am I doing them out of guilt? Or am I doing it to draw near to Jesus? Because spiritual disciplines, right, they're not a test of worth. They're a pathway to joy. And so when we're looking at the things that we do, the service that we do, the praying, all the things, right? When we're looking at those things, we got to ask ourselves, am I doing these things out of guilt, or am I doing these things to draw near to Jesus? There should be a pathway to joy. And Jesus uses a wedding image, right? He uses a wedding image for a reason. He's the groom. We're invited to the party. That means joy is supposed to be characterized by our faith, right? Everywhere we should go, we should be a joyful people, not a guilty people. Too many Christians live like Jesus came to make their life harder. You ever met that Christian, right? Like here's Jesus, and now my life is harder, not better. But Jesus said he came so that his joy may be in us and his joy may be made complete. So again, ask yourself, is my relationship with Jesus, is it marked by joy or is it marked by obligation? And if we can learn this, our life will be much more full. Jesus didn't come to make you more religious. Instead, he came to make you more alive. He redefines fasting. He redefines rest. He redefines spiritual discipline, not as heavy burdens, but as joyful invitations to walk in freedom with him. At the end of the day, Jesus redefines the rules. Let's keep reading with me in Mark 2, verse 23. On the Sabbath, he was going through the grain fields, and his disciples began to make their way, picking some heads of grain, and the Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" He said to them, "Have you never read what David did? And those who were with him as they were in need and they were hungry? How they entered into the house of God in the time of Abiathar, the high priest, and they ate the bread of the presence, which was not lawful for anyone except for the priests, and also gave some to his companions. Then he told them the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So then the Son of Man is Lord even over the Sabbath." Now, Jesus and his disciples, right, they're walking through a grain field, right? They're walking through and they're going through and they're hungry, and it's the Sabbath, and you're on the Sabbath, you're not supposed to do any work. You're supposed to prepare your food ahead of time, and you can eat the food that was been prepared ahead of time, but you can't cook new food. You can't do any of that kind of stuff. And here they are, they're just walking along, and they see a grain field, and they pluck some grain there, and they just kind of eat the seeds there. And the Pharisees are like, "We gotcha. We gotcha. What are you doing? You're doing what's not lawful on the Sabbath." And the problem isn't that they're plucking, grain from someone else's field. That's not a problem. In fact, the Old Testament tells us that if you are a farmer, when it's time to, what's it called when you take the grain? Yeah, harvest. There you go. When it's time to harvest your grain, you leave the corners of your field. Right, the corners of the field were for the widows, for the orphans, for the travelers, for anyone who might be in need, right? And so you leave the corners, you leave those on purpose. And so when Jesus and his disciples, they're plucking heads of grain from someone else's field, no problem. That's part of the Old Testament. The problem that they said is that they're doing it on the Sabbath. And so they were plucking grain on the Sabbath, right? That's a problem. That's work. Then in order to get the seeds that they were eating, the kernels that they were eating, you actually have to like rub it together and get it out, and that friction, they say that's work. You can't do that much work on the Sabbath. And so they were doing too much work. And Jesus, though, he's going to respond. He responds with a story from 1 Samuel. It's a story of David. He's hungry, and he's with his companions, and he goes into the temple, and he eats the bread of the presence, or the showbread, it might be saying in your Bible. And he gives it to his companions who are with him, and this is technically unlawful. And this bread, it would have been placed on the altar, right, every Sabbath, only to be eaten by the priests. And here's the point. Jesus is saying, if David could bend the rules in a moment of need, how much more could the Son of Man? Then he says, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Right? And that flips the entire religious system upside down. Jesus is not against the rules, but he is against using rules to control people, to crush their spirits. And the Sabbath is not a test. The Sabbath is a gift. And Jesus, as Lord of the Sabbath, he is the one who gives it. And so Faith Chapel, I want you to hear this. When we make our faith more about rules than we do about relationships, we lose the entire heart of God. God doesn't want you to serve the Sabbath. He doesn't want you to serve the rules. He wants the Sabbath to serve you. So let me ask you, are you resting in Jesus, or are you still trying to perform for God? Because, church, rules don't change our hearts, but relationships can. Rules do have a place, right? We if you're any rule followers in the house, like if there's a rule, I'm following it. All right, well, one. Okay, the rest of you are a bunch of heathens. But here we are, right? Like they have their place. They provide structure. They can guide us towards God's best. But they don't transform us. Only a relationship with Jesus can change the heart. Rules, right? They can modify behavior. They can help you temporarily, but only love transforms someone from the inside out. But we all know that it's so easy. Like legalism still creeps in. It's easy for us to become Pharisaical without even realizing it. We may not seem to freak out like the Pharisees did, but we might judge others for how they worship. Or we might think that God is more pleased when we do more. Or we might feel guilty about resting instead of trusting. And guys, sometimes the best thing you can do for your walk with God, for your relationship with others, is just to take a holy nap and recharge. That is okay. But somehow what we do is we feel guilty about that. And so when Jesus says the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath, he's reminding us that I am in charge, not your rules, not your guilt, not your spiritual scorecard. So don't let religion rob your relationship with Jesus. Stop measuring your faith by what you do and then start enjoying who you're with. Many Christians live with this kind of low-level anxiety about whether they're doing enough. Am I doing enough? Am I doing enough? But Jesus says, come to me, all who are weary, all who are burdened, and I will give you rest. The Sabbath and ultimately Jesus himself is not about rules to follow, but it's about rest to receive. Jesus invites you to rest, not to strive. And so I want you to take time this week to remember you are not your productivity. You are not your productivity. You don't need to earn God's love. And you can rest because Jesus is enough. And remember, spiritual practices, man, they're still good. But they should fill you, not drain you. Bible reading, prayer, fasting, Sabbath, these are meant to fill your soul, not crush your spirit. So ask, where has my walk with Jesus become more about performance than presence? And then recenter yourself on a relationship over a routine. The Sabbath was made for you. Jesus can lift your burdens, right? He's not here to pile more on. You don't need to perform. You just need to come to him and rest. Now let's look at this last section for the day. And what I want you to see is that Jesus also redefines religion. We're going to read in Mark 3, 1 through 6. Jesus enters the synagogue once again. And a man was there with a shriveled hand. In order to accuse him, they were watching him closely to see whether he would heal on the Sabbath. He told the man with the shriveled hand, "Stand before us." And he said to him, "Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath or to do evil, to save a life or to kill?" But they were silent. After looking around at them in anger, he was grieved at the hardness of their hearts, and he told the man, "Stretch out your hand." And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored. Immediately the Pharisees went out, and they started plotting with the Herodians against him so that they might kill him. All right, it's the Sabbath again. Jesus walks into the synagogue. He sees a man with a shriveled hand. And before we get into our point today, I noticed something in this that I'd never really thought about before. And I just kind of want you to see this. It's the first time I've ever seen this week. Out of all the miracles of Jesus, right? Think of all his miracles and how great they were. Think about the casting out of demons, healing a paralytic that we looked at last week, a person who couldn't even walk, raising the dead, healing the terminally ill, of calming the sea, walking on water. Like, he did big miracles, feeding the 5,000. This might be the smallest miracle out of everything that he does. This might be the smallest one. In fact, while it is a big deal to this one person, this may be the most insignificant miracle that Jesus ever performed, in comparison anyway to all those big ones. But here's the cool thing that I noticed. Is that Jesus cares about every part of us. He cares about every part of us. Even when others may consider it insignificant, he cares about it. But back to our main point here. Jesus walks into the synagogue. The religious leaders, they're watching him, right? They're waiting. They're watching him like hawks. They want to know what he's going to do. They do know that he has the power to heal, but healing would be considered work on the Sabbath. It's a violation. And so before he even helps this man, Jesus is just going to address the elephant in the room. He goes, "Hey, guys, I know you're watching. I know you're watching. So is it good for me to do harm? Or is it better for me to do good? Is it better to save a life, or is it better to kill?" And no one answers them. They're just silent. And in this moment, as he looks around at them, he looks around at them with anger, and he grieves their hardness of heart. And so here we are. Jesus is angry. Okay, Jesus gets angry. He's angry. He's angry at the religion that would rather keep the rules than to help someone who's suffering. And he's telling us that that's not faith, guys. That's legalism. And so he heals this man. And the Pharisees, right, they immediately start plotting his death. And church, religion without compassion will always lead to death. Religion without compassion helps no one. It certainly doesn't point people to Jesus. And Jesus came to bring life. Jesus came to heal. He came to restore. He came to set people free. And this is the irony of this. The people trying to protect the Sabbath are actually now going to break the Sabbath by plotting murder. Their religion made them blind to the very heart of God. So we ask again, where has religion become a weight in your life? instead of a gift for your life. Right? Maybe for you it's a quiet time that feels more like an obligation than a lifeline. Maybe it's church attendance that feels like a box to check. I mean, we love you here and we love that you come, but take a vacation, right? It's okay. Maybe it's how you worship. How you worship is more important than who you worship. Maybe it's guilt or shame that you carry, and you every day you're just feeling like you can never measure up. Let me say this clearly. Jesus did not come to weigh you down. Instead, he came to lift your burdens. And that guilt or that shame that you carry is just as important to Jesus as this man's withered hand. Jesus redefines rest, he redefines rules, he redefines religion, not to demand more, but to offer more. Jesus said in Matthew 11:28, come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, because I am lowly and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And that's what it means to follow the Lord of the Sabbath. To find your rest, to find rest for your soul, for his rules to be for you, not a burden against you. And so today, here's what I want you to do is we're going to close and we're going to pray. I want you to reflect on these three ideas. I want you to identify the burdens that you've been carrying. Where has faith become more about performance than it's been about grace? Right? Identify the burdens you've been carrying. Next, I want you to try to return to the heart of Jesus. Yes, spend time with him, okay? Spend time with him. Not because you have to, but because you get to. And then second or third, receive his rest. Right? Not only on the Sabbath day, but daily. Right? Jesus is your rest. He is your finished work. He is your freedom. Identify the burdens you've been carrying. Return to the heart of Jesus. Receive his rest. And let's not be people who miss Jesus because we're so busy just trying to be right. Let's be people who walk in freedom, extend compassion, and rest in the love of the one who gave himself up for us.